this episode, I interviewed Dan and discuss his experience with getting add-ons listed on AppSource. This is a Dynamics 365 show focusing on the ingredients of a successful Dynamics 365 practice. Your host is Business Solution MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. If you've had an add-on for Dynamics, I'd be keen to have a chat with you and maybe look at doing a podcast regarding your add-on. Send me a message on Twitter or LinkedIn by searching for NZ365 Guy. To review the show notes for this episode, please go to nz365guy.com/24. I'd like to thank the generous contribution from our sponsor, the Dynamics 365 User Group. Dynamics 365 User Group is the world's most influential user group community of Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM users and partners. Across the globe, members share a common goal of maximizing and advancing the performance of Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM so that individuals and companies can improve operations, overcome obstacles, and exceed goals. Hi everyone, I'm here with Dan Hesketh, and in this episode we're going to be discussing the process and the how, what, and whys of listing your Dynamics 365 app on AppSource. The challenges you may face, how to overcome them as an independent software vendor, or otherwise known as ISV. Dan is passionate Microsoft Dynamics 365 solution architect and functional developer currently working in Melbourne, Australia. He leans towards UI and UX design, end-user facing training, and all assortment of technologies used to assist in user adoption. He has been involved in database and CRM projects as varied as they come. Dan, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's really exciting to be chatting to you.
Okay, so this is a topic dear to my heart, AppSource. In a former life, I've created apps when I worked at Magnetism and created various ISV products. And back there, you had to go through a Lion Bridge type process of getting it validated. You had to leave your code in escrow and a whole range of things. So it's going to be interesting to have a chat. But let's talk about your career up to this point and basically how you took the leap into Dynamics.
Sure. So my background is a little bit varied, coming from things such as being in the music industry for about 7 or 8 years directly prior to, I guess, getting into Fin Services and Dynamics. So that was a different kind of, seems like a different life now. I jumped into financial services, which again was a bit of a leap for me at the time. And in the financial services space, we were faced with a raft of problems with software and just accountability and transparency in the business. So we ended up engaging a Dynamics CRM partner at the time. And this was back in 2010. So it was right around the birth of CRM 2011 and the cloud sort of thing. So we actually deployed a solution with their help, very basic, but it was CRM 2011 online. It was a little bit rocky at the beginning, a bit performance-wise and other things, but we got started with that, and I kind of really fell in love with it, with the product. And I'd never used Dynamics before then. So for me, I'd always been involved in computers and software and things like that, but not to the degree of being able to really mold it and shape it as much as I could with CRM. So from there, basically, we ended up developing, I guess, the first type of ISV solution that we had, which was in the Fin Services space, and we ended up going out and starting to sell that to other financial practices around the place.
What was that called?
Well, that was actually, funnily enough, we called it Mia, which is my business name. So the thing actually started where we just wanted to give this product a name and we didn't know what to call it. So we came up with a silly name, probably like some people call their cars girls' names. We came up with a name and we liked it, and we kind of ended up becoming known as the Mia guys, the guys from Mia, and more talking about the product than the company. But when we had to change our name, we decided Mia was pretty much fine because that's what everyone knew us as. So in any case, we were running around selling a solution, a managed solution to do with running your financial services, financial planning and mortgage broking type practices. And yeah, we kind of fell into that, and we got into the ISV space through that kind of sphere. So we've always been angled that way. And only more recently have I sort of started doing other type varied projects. I guess like I always saw other partners doing kind of varied projects all over the place. I used to just very much be in one corner of the room doing one thing. So this was a new thing for me.
So I take it there you're referring to partners are either, if you like, run a consulting gig and they basically hire to solve a customer's problem and therefore, offer their services where they use Dynamics or Power Apps as a platform to build on, or you could be a Microsoft partner, if you like, that was an independent software vendor and you created add-on solutions. So you're saying you're doing a bit of both now, is that right?
Yeah, so we definitely started out more like a packaged product that we sold, I guess, to almost cookie cutter, you could say, running around selling the same thing over and over again, where in a vertical, as Microsoft like to call it. And only recently, in the last sort of 6 to 12 months, have I really started to branch out into more general consulting, which I've actually found really refreshing, to be honest. So I've maybe come at it from the opposite angle than some, but yeah.
Definitely. Most people, well, in my experience, go it from they've got consulting, they develop some IP, and they are like, hey, can we turn that into a solution? But the problem is a lot of people or a lot of organizations don't necessarily dedicate resources to that solution creation process, and therefore it becomes kind of like the ugly child in the corner in a way, that they're pouring money into it, but it's not resulting in something. So you've come up from the other way around. You've created an ISV product, and then you've got into consulting work as well. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so tell me, how do you balance the consulting business with ongoing R&D, product development on your add-on products?
Yeah, look, I think that's been an organic. Most things for me and for us have been a fairly organic process. We haven't necessarily decided we want to conquer the world, from day one. We kind of just did things we liked doing, and because the love of what we were doing kind of fueled us, I guess, initially and even ongoing. So look, it is hard to balance the recurring nature of supporting existing customers and developing that product or that vertical solution, and also going out and just saying, hey, here's a new company, what's your problem? I'll try and help you. But I've found that actually having that ISV sort of development knowledge has helped us sort of have a bit of a toolkit already of things that I know work physically, because I've had to go out and obviously train individual users at businesses all over the country to use our solution. So I learnt lots of tricks and neat ways of helping me do that, helping me support that product. So that actually in turn has made it easier for me sometimes to cut through the crap a little bit and get to the point of what's going to be easy for people to use and learn.
Yeah, it makes sense. So just want to clarify that on that last question there is, how do you make sure that your staff or the allocation of time is dealing with the ISV component as opposed to the consulting? So if you like, the cash in the hand now as opposed to the vision and investing, and you're going to make a return later. How do you balance that in your business?
I always try to, it's an ideal I strive for. It doesn't always work, but I'd always like to think that whatever work we are doing, whether it be straight consulting where we've come across a business that needs help in a completely obscure field that we're not used to or whatever, I would always like to think that whatever we develop or come up with is helping something as an asset, something ongoing. So whether that be that we've figured out a new industry all of a sudden and we've got ideas of how we could build a solution from that we can go and sell to others to help other people, or it's going to help one of our existing products potentially or whatever, sort of to, give it. I think other industries that you're not used to often have problems that can inform your industry that you're used to or that you're working in. So, other sectors definitely can assist in what you're trying to do in your kind of little niche, I think.
Yeah, so true. So fast forward to where we are now. You've got some ISV add-on products. Tell us a bit about what modules or what people could go out and buy now from you that you have created over the last period.
Yeah, so about a year ago, we just sort of through frustration a little bit with, again, the user adoption training side, which I'm kind of passionate about. I had a couple of little tricks up my sleeve that we'd been using with our products before with our existing customers that I sort of started thinking, why am I not sort of exposing these to other people in other industries? Because really they could help them too. So we took these two ideas, and one of them is it's called D365 Tiles. and the other one's called D365 checklists. And they're kind of as what you would call an add-on. They're not a full-blown vertical, industry solution. They are really just a little add-on solution. Now, the tiles one is basically everyone's used Windows before, right? Windows 8.1, they came out with the tiled interface. One thing I've always found strange with Dynamics, having used it for the last 6-7 years, whatever it is, that they haven't used tiles. They're known for being tile centric, and they haven't actually really. I know they do in AX or finance and operations and Nav a little bit, but they haven't really utilized tiles that much in Dynamics CRM. So tiles was a way of a user or a business or whatever being able to create a dashboard of tiles. So you utilize the dashboard infrastructure, I guess, of CRM, and you can build your own homepage, let's call it, with, say, 8 tiles on it, different shapes and sizes and colors. But effectively, each of those tiles, I've built in the capability, very easy, click and create, to link to records in CRM, link to views, other dashboards, do some more custom URLs, external things. You can link to videos or podcasts, I guess, or whatever you want on there. So you can really create a bespoke homepage for a user. And I found this very useful again, this was a need I had to be able to train people that didn't want to use CRM. People that didn't want to learn how to use the sitemap and click 100 times to get to things. So you can literally give them one screen and put everything they need on there. A link to my tasks, a link to create a record, create a contact, whatever it may be, and bake it all into one screen. So that's the tiles one, and that's been really helpful for me. The other one is the checklist. So again, I had users that were using tasks and trying to type in copious amounts of notes and almost like a mini checklist of their own, putting their initials next to things and trying to tick them off and timestamp them manually and everything. So I just went out and said, this has got to be easier, and I can see a real demand for this in a way in my own existing customers. So I built this checklist thing. So people can check it out if they need to, but effectively it's allowed. You can create a to-do list, drag and drop items around, tick them off, say that they're in progress, say that they're done or not done. And it's just a way of, you can also deliver them via workflows and enforced processes, so that I guess a business, if you want to make sure that every time your staff respond to a client or do a certain process, that they always tick off those 10 things that you want to have happen, you can sort of build it in. So it's a really nice UI. I try to really make these things, I try to push things a bit further than some may do. I like to go a lot further with them, and push them a bit further, because I like to, go the extra mile, and I try to make them really simple and just, easy to use but powerful. So that's kind of the idea behind them.
You're not saying that developers don't have much understanding of UI or UX, are you?
Yeah. Look, I've always felt a real underlying frustration sometimes, to be honest, with Dynamics CRM, like in the way that it's very rigid in what it is, and it's great because of that, but it's also one of its downfalls. And I've always wished, sometimes it just gets to the point where I'm so frustrated that I can't make something like users expect, like an iOS app. You click an app on the phone and it opens, right? And it's that simple. Sometimes you just want to do that, and I get so frustrated. I go, you know what? I'm going to work out how to do it, and I'm going to build it. I'm not going to just, keep the status quo. So that's kind of where they come from.
Okay, so interesting there. So the two type of solutions, I would call them horizontal solutions. They could apply to any industry, and they're not specific to any either. And so interesting, because what you told me to start with is that you really started with what, we commonly refer to as a vertical solution, which is targeting it in a specific industry. Are you still working in that vertical space with a vertical solution as well?
Yes, we still have customers and we're still working in that space. But part of, I guess, to be honest, part of my business thinking was that there's a huge amount of competition in the financial services, in particular in the last couple of years. And I mean, we could talk for hours about that, but the basic thing is, for my business, I also didn't want to limit the creativity or the things that we're creating. I didn't want to just only my existing customer base see that stuff and take advantage of it. I was sort of like, why? I'm pretty sure every single Dynamics CRM customer could use my tiles thing or the checklist thing. I guarantee they would get use out of it. So I was like, how do I do this? And now AppSource just happened to come by at the right time, that it sort of just, it literally was perfect timing. And I just went, whoa, this thing is exactly what I need. A bit of a kick up the butt too, to really start trying to go a bit horizontal and a bit wider.
Okay, so do you plan in the future creating a vertical solution? And therefore, with a vertical solution, it's not just about installation, training, etc. It's much more about all the holistic type skills that surround it. Like in the financial sector, you got to know stuff about finance, as an example.
Yep.
So if you're going to create a system, for example, to manage franchises, you got to know about how do you onboard a franchisee, how to facilitate the day-to-day payments, is ongoing training in whatever the franchise business or expertise is. So there's a lot more soft skills, if you like, that surround it, just like if you're creating a medical application. Tell me, what are your thoughts around the future of creating vertical solutions, not just for yourself, but really in the market? And just one thing, don't give me the Microsoft line that, we should all be vertical. Tell me from your experience and your observations.
Look, definitely from a personal angle, quickly, I definitely think that being vertical from the beginning, from years ago, I did feel a little bit isolated, to be honest, as I sort of described it as being in a sort of corner of the room and everyone else is jumping around having a party and I'm sort of over there. Well, Dan's the finance guy, the finance fin services guy. And I feel like I lost opportunities because of that, because of not opening my horizons. So that's why I wanted to go a bit more horizontal with things, even consulting or the apps. But in saying that, I definitely think what I've found is an example of releasing these apps late last year. They are horizontal. You pointed that out. And I think to some degree that's actually had a negative impact on them. I think sometimes I expect other people to be as imaginative as I am with the apps and know that, the tiles thing, you can literally build anything with it. But sometimes it's better to package, and this is part of my plan longer term, is to actually build, say, the tiles app for field service. And now that's horizontal and vertical, sort of. It's a bit product specific, but the point is sometimes you have to build tiles for financial services or tiles for banking or tiles for education. And I think sometimes that works because, yes, you're talking the lingo, you have dashboards or tiles that are specific to that problem. So when people from that industry look at it, they go, oh, yes, it mentions that catchphrase, that word in our industry. So I definitely think verticals are important. So, yes, Microsoft harps on about it. For a long time I was going, verticals? I've been in a vertical. I don't want to be in a vertical anymore. But the point is, I think it definitely is useful in certain ways, but I do think there is more. You notice Microsoft now mentioning horizontal now with product lines, field service, project service. I think the product suite opening up like it has definitely made it a bigger playing field for sure with going horizontal as well as vertical. So I don't think there's a right answer. It's a bit of a mix. Some people are completely horizontal. Some people are completely vertical, and there's people in between. I think it can work depending on what industry you're in and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. It sounds like what you're talking about there is like kind of niching down. Even though it's a horizontal solution, you could basically niche it down for the Americans into a specific space. And then the potential is so you could enter multiple niches, as in, therefore, yeah, it's kind of like verticalizing, horizontaling the solution in a way, right? So, and I think that's smart. I think that's smart because when a buyer looks at things, they are looking for those keywords and phrases that is in the language that they're used to. So, I think, creating multiple, in my mind, the word template came to mind for your solution. Yeah, I'd say it could be pretty powerful. So tell me, what challenges have you come across in creating add-ons? And go as broad as you want with that one.
Look, I think you have to, when you've got a great idea, you've maybe built something that, for a customer or a few customers in the past, and you think, this is great, this thing, like it's really awesome. It saves them time. It saves us time, whatever it is. Sometimes taking that actual piece of functionality and trying to boil it down to either a good part of an idea or something that's going to be dynamic. You have to be able to take your solution and sort of strip it back sometimes a little bit to the point where it is generic enough that it can apply to different people, because not everyone does think like I do or like you do. So making it dynamic is really one of the things that I worked a lot on with these solutions is trying to make them as flexible as possible, out of the box, so that people can kind of use it how they want to use it. If it's really specific, it's good in maybe a vertical, but if people want to, have a different idea to me, I want them to be able to do that too, to a certain degree. So that's one of the things that I would say. I think the AppSource listing process and certification, and I know we'll probably talk a bit more about this, but
yeah, we will.
Those things were a challenge because that was really brand new. When I listed these two apps at once, I really did probably bite off more than I could chew to a certain degree.
So hang on, you said you did this just last year, right?
Yeah, so last June, it was pretty much a year ago, I started trying to list them. And
AppSource had been out for over a year by that point, had been in play. So I want to drill into that because that's interesting. You're not the first person that's talked, if you like, in regards to AppSource. So we'll drill into that a bit more. But tell me, what are the other challenges?
I think the other part is even once I had the solutions up and listed, it was then sort of like, oh, what now? What do I do now? How do I market these things? How do I build a channel? I can definitely see that it's great to be able to get in front of end customers directly, from all over the world. But I think one of the things that I identified pretty quickly was that, particularly for my solutions, I felt like I could help other partners help their customers. You know what I mean? It's going to help. Like every ISV under the sun has a partner program to try to have other partners sell their products for them. And, because we're localized in one particular country or whatever, you don't want to limit yourself to, well, I'm only going to sell this in Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously other people around the world could take advantage of it, but it probably requires some other partners to see the power of the thing and go, yeah, actually we need this. It's going to help us. So the channel development is definitely a big challenge for me.
Okay, interesting. What tips would you give to other people, I'll say people because they might necessarily partners, considering creating add-ons? What if you were to say, hey, here's 3 things, get these things right before, heading down that path, or what would you advise?
I think definitely there's a lot of partners out there and customers that have probably created some pretty cool things, and definitely look through your trick bag, and if there's things that you think have merit that you haven't seen before, go and have a look online, see if other people have already done it. I had a few other ideas that I've done before and built solutions for, and then I looked and there's someone else that's already released it, whether it's one of the big guys like Power Objects or someone else, but whoever it is. But, the point is you don't need to, I'm not going to go and recreate the wheel and if someone else has already done a good job of it. But the second thing I think would be draw it on paper, think it through. I literally drew stuff on paper. I think maybe that's a architect type thing that I do. I don't know, but it's literally draw it out and think, will this work physically? And would people use it? And what's the benefit of doing this? Why would they use it? And I think the third thing is really just try to take it a little bit further than just really basic out of the box looking stuff. Anyone can create an entity and a few fields, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's got to be useful to the point where other partners even would look at it and go, this will save us some time, or this will make it easy for us, rather than getting our developers to just create it in a day kind of thing. So I think just push it a little bit further for the end user too, because we all know that as end users, even ourselves, we expect it to take 2 clicks to get something done rather than 90 clicks. And sometimes developers, coders, full-on coders can sometimes produce the result in 99 clicks and it still works, but no one's going to use it. So take it a bit further if you can and really try to push yourself. That's what I would say.
Yeah, 100%. How do you manage where you've got it deployed and people come back and go, oh, we just need our one to do X, or we just need our one to do Y, and so therefore, and how do you handle it?
So we've sort of grown up with this sort of situation with our Fin Services solution, from years ago. So we're very used to every customer that you go to is special or unique, really they are. So, and they have their own slants on things and they want to customize things. So, we're used to doing that. So where our solution is the base and we know what we can lay over the top of it with some customizations and what's going too far off track to make it too hard to manage. I think with the add-ons, it's similar. Look, some people with their apps go to the point of open sourcing them and just giving them away. which is fine too. You can just say, here, have it. Go and extend it or whatever you want to do. If you're going to make a product that you're selling, obviously commercially, and obviously you have to consider those things too. But sometimes building that sort of thinking in, like I said, to your framework of how customizable is this going to be for people. You want people to be able to tweak it or sort of not customize it as such, but, fully, push it as far as they can, at least within the bounds of being still part of the solution and manageable. So, yeah, I think that's a difficult question to answer in a way. You've got to draw the line somewhere, unless you're just going to give them the solution unmanaged and free source code and just say, go for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm talking to a bunch of people at the moment that have done that and are now regretting it because, they've been doing it for like over 5+ years and they're realizing that it's not putting any food on their table and they've invested literally hundreds of hours for something they've given away. And then there's, a lot of commercial organizations as an enterprise size Dynamics partners that are using all that free stuff they've given away and making money off it. And so they're monetizing it, but the actual individual, often it's individuals that have created this open source code, are left with, the naming rights, and that's about it. So it's interesting. So tell me, what have you found works when working with Microsoft now, specifically in this ISV space, rather than in your consulting business?
Look, I think the thing that everyone's got to understand is how good an opportunity AppSource is, like, in itself. I think I have my struggles with Microsoft, as a partner, being a small partner. I'm just a small guy, I'm just a couple of guys. We don't have a lot of, we don't have a bat phone into Redmond or anything like that. So part of the challenge that all of us small partners have is that we don't have much of a voice necessarily. But if you shake enough trees and, whatever, you can sometimes get things done. I think AppSource and the platform, the product itself, I can't sort of stress enough how I think we all, if you're listening to this podcast now, you're probably excited by Dynamics 365, you're probably into it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's the biggest shift in the last year or so with all the Power Apps and Flow and everything else coming into it as well, and CDS2. This stuff is pretty phenomenal. You're not going to get this kind of level of advancement from other sort of platforms, to be honest. And I think it's been great. So part of working with Microsoft, they will bend over backwards depending on what the flavor of the month is sometimes. So if you can pick whatever's kind of hot with Microsoft right now, you've got to understand, like with any corporate entity, the people working at Microsoft have KPIs and have, sort of things too, so you got to find out what that is. And I think in the last year or so, it just happened to be AppSource was kind of one of the hot things. So if you kind of were jumping on the AppSource bandwagon by releasing your apps and whatever, then they kind of wanted to know about you, which I thought was, you just got to take advantage when you can. So, yeah.
So we are going to drill into AppSource a bit more, but just while we're talking about Microsoft here, I've heard feedback from other ISVs that they would meet a list of requirements to post to AppSource, go back, edit their software, make it compliant, go back to resubmit it. Oh, the rules have changed. There's new rules, and we now need you to go away, edit. And there was a level of frustration in that the goalposts just kept constantly moving, and, it made it very hard for them to be commercially viable with their solution, with, if you like, this black art going on behind the scenes of what's the new rules, if you like. So did you run into it?
Not so much with the apps I did, because they were smaller add-ons. I guess it was probably less exposed to that kind of scenario. But look, AppSource was, for me, it was brand new at the time. And I know that they were still very much in the sort of fluid changing of the process of how to onboard and all that sort of stuff. So definitely the goalposts were moving even as far as the AppSource onboarding process, and the listing, publication, publishing. So there was definitely frustration trying to learn how to do all that while it was still kind of moving. And even some people didn't quite know how, at Microsoft didn't even know what was going on. So, but I actually found the hardest part for me, though, was actually just figuring out fundamentally, could I do what I was trying to do? Like, not specifically, technically, like, yes, you can tick that box or no. It was literally, can I build these apps and deploy them and demo them this way or using the AppSource platform? It was really hard to tell. I had to really just bust my head through a brick wall to just keep going. And in the end, I figured out I could do what I wanted to do, but it really wasn't clear at the beginning. So I really did sink a couple of months' work in a way into getting them online and published, when it could have just gone south and just not even happened. I could have wasted all that time. So that was frustrating.
What do you think that Microsoft could do to make it a smoother onboarding experience for newcomers?
I think, again, from my point of view, they do actually contact you, and they've got some really good people in their team. Once I'd actually got about halfway through the process, I had a few contacts there. So I already knew a few people's names, and so I was able to reach out, and they were actually really responsive, like to emails and stuff. So that was really good. But in saying that, I guess some people, if I look back at myself before I listed, all the questions I had really weren't answered until I figured them out myself. People really didn't maybe get what I was trying to ask. Maybe I wasn't good at asking the right questions. But I think they could potentially, maybe have their material. Their materials are a lot more advanced now than they were a year ago. But maybe just the actual team that reach out to you at the beginning maybe could spend a bit more time with you to find out what your solution is and tell you the pitfalls and the things you might need. Do you really want to go down this path? Are you going to have issues with the certification process or with the actual demoing or the test drives and all the other stuff that's now there? Maybe they could be a little bit more upfront about how it actually physically works once you've got it rolled out.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. I think that's going to be valuable to a lot of people. Tell me, how have you found working with, let's say, the channel or partners, other Microsoft implementation partners, in regards to your product? What's your experience?
I think this is the area that I really need to do more work on. Obviously, established ISVs, I'll call them, that have long-running solutions that are really good at doing this stuff and having their partners programs and channels set up. They do this stuff great. I'm still learning. So for me, it's more of a grassroots thing, getting the word out on these things and what they are. And like I said, maybe even doing some more work, going back to the drawing board a little bit on making them a bit more niche or verticalized, even if it's from a marketing standpoint, not even changing the solution so much, but just packaging them up as certain verticals. But look, I've met a lot of partners from around the world now just via queries and things coming in and reaching out to some of the other guys that have been doing this for a while too, in their add-on space. So that's been really good. I think the key is, for other people looking at their apps and stuff, is just how are you going to help those partners? Is your solution going to help the partners deploy quicker, or, is it going to make their customers happier, whatever it is? Making sure you communicate that idea well and having some kind of reason for them to give a crap, basically. At the moment, I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm even trying to figure out, pricing and everything else. We'll probably talk about that. But, there's a whole slew of things that it's not just about the CRM functionality, and that's what I was focused on mainly to begin with. It's actually a lot to do with marketing and pricing and that channel relationships and everything as well. I'd love to learn more from other people too, from other guys out there that are doing this already. I'm still a youngster at this, so. Interesting.
Can you walk me through the steps, if you like, from ideation to selling your first product that wasn't, if you like, with an existing customer, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So obviously you start with the idea. You've got an idea, whether it's something you've done before or you're just building it from scratch. Really, I think you need to test it out in a rough kind of way. You need to build it out. If it's not already built, you're probably going to have to do some flex testing. You're going to have to build it out, even in rough form. Don't worry so much about what you're calling things and whatever, because you'll probably scrap half of it, and rebuild it. But you need to really put it in a playground and just kind of play with it for a while. Look, if you're really full on with it, you could probably do some, test cases with customers or other things. I was already using some of my stuff internally with existing customers, so I already had a bit of a playground going in the real world. But obviously you got to develop it, and that's probably the easy part. We're all used to building things, and coding and using the platform. Obviously there's a lot more tools around for us now, with Azure and Flow and Power Apps and everything else. So that's something to consider. It's not just CRM anymore. I have to keep telling myself that. but definitely test it. And I think really having some of this, I mean, I've done a talk at the CRM D365 Saturday recently on AppSource as well and touched upon some of these points. But, there's so much more to it with marketing and pricing and the how you're going to list it and how you're going to push it afterwards, with partners. So starting to think about that stuff early is good, because even once you go to list on AppSource, you're going to have some of that material ready. It's going to delay you if you don't. It's not a bad thing. I kind of built it as I went, in a way. I went, oh, hang on, I need new icons in these sizes. Go and do them. Luckily, I've got a bit of graphics knowledge and I use Illustrator and stuff, so I didn't have to go out to another external party to do all that. But there's a lot to it. So just sort of get started now and start planning it out first. But I think, really, once you've got it listed, you'll get leads in, and I guess that's when you start figuring out what your process is for selling this thing, because it is different to consulting, and people are contacting you from the opposite ends of the earth, asking about pricing, asking about this and that. So you've got to be able to field those questions and have the resources to respond and have all your pricing on the website or whatever it may be.
Okay, interesting. Let's jump into a bit more detail in around AppSource. First of all, what resources are available to ISVs to get listed on AppSource? What do they need to go read? What do they need to go watch? Who do they need to speak to? That type of thing. What resources are out there for people?
Look, for me, again, I didn't know anything at the time, so I just sort of led my way through it. So basically, once you've actually gone onto the AppSource website, you can register your interest effectively. That's what they do. So you register your app, but really all it's doing is sending a contact us form out to the team, and they'll reach out to you, and they'll try to set up a session with you to have a chat, and they'll find out a bit about your product. And obviously you can point them to websites. If you're already selling it in another form now, you can do that. But effectively from there, the AppSource, by the time I'd finished listing my 2 apps and trying to figure it all out myself, I noticed that their documentation on the actual publishing portal had got a lot better. So that was something I didn't really have the advantage of initially, but there's definitely a lot of knowledge there on what this field is and what do they mean when they're asking this question or that question. So that you got to read that. You have to read it, because otherwise you'll have no idea what's going on, like I didn't. And I think the other thing is, I created a LinkedIn group called the AppSource Alliance just to try to share some more articles around this stuff and probably try to connect with some more people that are going through this for the first time or people that have done it before, to share their experiences, because I felt very kind of alone at the time. I know other people had already listed, but I didn't feel like I had the means to reach out to Click Dimensions and ask them, hey, how do you guys go with this, question on the publishing portal? But so I wanted to create a bit of a community around that sort of stuff. So if anyone's kind of interested, I guess they could check out that LinkedIn group and ask questions, because, none of us mind answering questions and helping others.
Yeah, fantastic.
That would be
We'll
great.
make sure we put those all in the show notes so people can jump straight in there. So can you walk me through the different listing types in AppSource, as in from you can get it now, free trial, test drive, contact me. You can obviously have the ability that the solution deploys into the application. What if the solution is a full SaaS solution, as opposed to, it be a fully self-contained and in a package, as an example?
So the basic listing types or whatever you can opt for, I guess. If you go onto AppSource now, people are probably familiar, but you'll see some solutions that are like, hey, contact us. It's just like a glorified contact form on a website. They don't actually really allow you to do that one anymore, because I think people were just sort of using that option only and trying to get away with just getting leads, I guess, through it. But the main ones are get it now or free. It's basically giving your thing away. If your solution is free, then you can list it for free as get it now, and that just means people can download the managed solution directly into their thing, and there's no licensing or payments, and it's just fully functional, I guess.
Yep, as opposed to a free trial, I take it.
Correct. Free trial is managed solution of yours gets deployed into the customer or the end user's environment, and it's there in their tenant and their instance, and they get to play with it. Now, you have a timed 30-day trial, which you have to facilitate and build into your solution, by the way. So that's part of we'll talk about the improvements maybe AppSource can make later, but free trial is basically a 30-day trial, but it's in their instance. So it's like you sending them the solution in an email and they install it, and it's theirs, so once it's on their system, you can't extract it out at this stage anyway. So now for me, the most interesting one, by the time I got about 3/4 of the way through listing, this new thing came out called Test Drive. Now, it was new to Dynamics CRM or, customer engagement solutions, mind you. It had already been around for some of the Azure apps and things. But Test Drive is the kind of the pick of the bunch for me, because I had a really hard time as we were starting to give away the free trial, and that's what we listed to begin with. My problem was the IP and security of it, giving away our intellectual property, and we didn't have control of the environment. And also, but more importantly, Test Drive allows you to provision the end user on demand into your environment, my own demo tenant, for an hour or 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever we want. And it's my environment, so I can set up demo data. I can land them straight into the page that I want, maybe on, say, the tile dashboard, guide them through the whole thing. So literally within seconds, they're actually trying the experience out. And that's exactly what you want from a user experience point of view. So I very wholeheartedly think Test Drive is like the best option from my point of view anyway, for a certain type of app anyway.
Yeah. So what about it's fully SaaS, right? In that scenario.
Yep.
And therefore I can hear the dollar signs ringing as you have a bunch of, as in cost, talking about
licenses,
to you.
Yep.
Exactly, cost licenses to you to be able to offer test trials. Now, I can see the creators of the idea. I can see their finance model behind it and the benefits. But, mate, what happened if 1,000 people sign up tomorrow to give a test trial of, how does the whole licensing construct for the platform licensing, etc. work out?
This was one of the most confusing things for me fundamentally to begin with, to work out. I was like, how does this work? Because initially when you list your app, they were talking a lot about hot and cold instances. But that was actually a hangover from the Azure apps days, so they hadn't really built a bespoke thing around Dynamics customer engagement yet. So they were like, ignore that, just put 2 there or whatever, So, but the way that the licensing works is that I've got a Test Drive running right now, but I've only keyed in and bought 4 licenses. Now, if you don't have any licenses left, someone can't go and do the test drive yet. It gives them a message saying that it's full at the moment, or there's none available, So you have to know your demand. So that just came for me through experience, like seeing how many people were trying the app in the first few weeks and then adjusting. Now, I figured out that for me, at least, I was getting, like, when I wake up in the morning and I look at my phone, I've set up actually a Logic app sends me an email when someone provisions into our test drive. So I get like 2 or 3, maximum 4 really, a night, where people from overseas, while I've been sleeping, have been jumping on to test drive the apps. Now, it just was a sweet spot for me. So I only bought 4. If I bought 10 licenses, I'd be having 6 sit there generally, and not use them.
So this is time bound, right? Is it 1 hour? Someone gets on there, 30 minutes?
Yep.
What's
you can, and you guys, again, test drive, you have to write the Logic apps, but they give you a lot of the code anyway. But yes, your Logic app is the thing that times it. So we set ours at 1 hour. We thought 1 hour, because they're landing straight in a demo environment, within seconds they can play with it, and with our toys, let's say, we thought an hour's fine. They can get an idea of what it can do in an hour, and then they get deprovisioned, and the license is now spare again. So that's kind of how the licensing works. So yes, it depends on the type of solution you've got and how much demand you've got. But the good thing is, if you're getting that much demand and you're, I guess, getting that much exposure from it, then licenses, it's going to cost you something, but the opportunity cost of not doing this is higher, I would have thought.
Yeah. But we haven't talked about conversion. There's one thing to do a demo. There's another thing for someone to sign on the dotted line, so to speak.
That's right.
And, conversion is definitely an important factor, just so anyone thinking to run out and buy 100 licenses because everyone's turning up. So interesting. Okay, is there any, just in that process there, you talked about, let's say you'd get let's say the 5th person jumped on in your scenario.
Yep.
Is there any way to not lose that person? In other words, have you written any code around saying, hey, we'll notify you as soon as it's not full anymore, and therefore, and basically a hot link straight back in, so they can take, if you like, a queue,
Yep. Now, the funny thing is, I mean, I haven't looked at this for a few months, but the AppSource itself kind of handles the invitation process in a way. It pushes through the details of the person to your Logic apps to then provision them and do all the rest. But yes, if there's no licenses free, they already get a kind of message like that apparently it's full, and they will. I can't remember if it notifies, to be honest, off the top of my head, but it's close to doing that, I think, or it does do that. So my impression of that, without having looked at it now, I think it does something similar to what you're saying anyway. But you could build your Logic apps and Azure functions and things. You could probably, yes, build it out to be a bit more advanced than ours is. But we just looked at the demand versus, supply, I guess, and just bought enough licenses to cater for demand and just left it at that.
Okay. So what design specifications did you need to take into account when developing your product specifically for distribution through AppSource?
Yeah. So, and if this isn't obvious already, I'm talking mostly customer engagement, CRM sort of apps here and add-ons, but in my case, my personal experience. But look, the certification process to get your app certified and listed on AppSource is pretty rigorous. So they look at your JavaScript, they look at your plugins, they look at everything. And if it's not doing what it's supposed to do, they won't list it. If it's got any unsupported code, I mean, this is obvious, but effectively they look forward, obviously, to new versions of what's being deprecated and, hey, you shouldn't do that. So you literally get a Word doc back from the certification team that's like 200 pages long with 190 pages of warnings saying, yeah, you really shouldn't do that. You really shouldn't do that. You really shouldn't do this. And a lot of the warnings you can ignore. Technically, they're just warnings. That's all they are. But there's critical things you have to fix. They just will not certify you if you don't fix those two things. There's two critical things. So you got to remember that, I guess, before you go on this journey and try to go through all this effort, if what you're doing or your app that you've built is really unsupported, doing things that's unsupported, you're going to have to work out how to do it in a supported way. Or if that's not possible, maybe take things external to Azure or other, SaaS sort of things. Or you just don't do it. You just don't bother trying to list it because you're going to get knocked back. If there's things that are really red flags for them, they won't do it.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Dan, this has been very interesting. I've still got, another 100 questions to ask, that's bubbled out of here. I'm just wondering, time-wise, why don't we take a part 2 to this and come back in a couple of weeks' time? Because, there's a gold mine of information that you've provided there. And, I had a conversation like this with John Gravely after he sold Click Dimensions, and so much of this has appeared all since then, and so it gives a totally different perspective, which I love. But I've got a couple of quick fire questions I'd like to go through with you to wrap up. What books do you recommend most to people? And this doesn't have to be about dynamics, just in life in general, and why?
To be honest, I don't have time to read books anymore, and I wish I did. I do listen to audio podcasts and things, obviously.
Sorry, that covers podcasts, anything
great.
that comes on an RSS feed, not just books.
Beautiful. I read as much as I can from every other person that I can on Dynamics. So obviously all the MVPs, yourself, Mark, everyone, I try to keep touch of everything, LinkedIn, Twitter. It's just a goldmine of information. And there's so many people giving, information. It's unbelievable. That's how I've learned how to do everything pretty much, okay, since I started. So always try to give back, but, everyone's giving so much information. Podcast-wise, obviously, CRM Audio, MVP podcast with Gus Gonzalez. And, I love reading anything from Steve Mordew. That guy is just so to the point, and it's almost like I have the same thoughts as this guy, and he just actually gets down and writes it down. And I love it. So I read anything of his because he just cuts to the chase, and he's obviously got all the inside connections too. So he tells me things I would never know. So I would just recommend, there's so much information out there. Just check out all of the people blogging and stuff. It's just the best way to get all the information.
Yeah, excellent. Steve Mordew, apart from having a shocking haircut and being vertically challenged, he comes up with some great content. What's your favorite apps and why?
Look, I would have to say XRM Toolbox. I can't think of any other. I was looking at my machines and looking at my phone and just trying to think of a good app. In reality, XRM Toolbox is just I was actually having a similar thought to what you mentioned earlier in the show. earlier about XRM Toolbox, but it's just so amazing how much these guys have built. You know, everyone's built for this thing, and you use it so often. And, you know, without it, I remember the days when we didn't have it, and it was so hard. This is so much easier. So I'd have to say XRM Toolbox gets it. I love Microsoft Teams as well now, so that's kind of up there too for me, but XRM Toolbox.
Excellent. Do you have any daily rituals that kind of, you know, get you sparked up for the day?
I don't have anything kind of cool for this one or inspiring, to be honest. Everyone has, you know, everyone on LinkedIn has these, you know, inspiring posts and things, but in reality, what I like to do is I try to check all my customers, to be honest. Like, you know, we have support tickets and things like that, but I really like to try to stay on top of that stuff and make sure they're good. You know, if the customers are happy, then I'm happy. So if I can deal with that stuff first and be on the front foot, don't let things fester. I hate that's the worst.
Yeah.
Relationships
Agreed.
are key. So, you know, get on the front foot and talk to your customers if you haven't heard from them in a while. That's what I do.
Great. What recommendations have you or would you make to people considering a career in Dynamics?
I think try to get your hands dirty in as many different areas or roles in the development, support, training, get out into customer sites, you know, and you get a good spread of what's involved and you get a good feel for what end users need in the customer site, you know, what training versus support and development back at the office. I think just try to get your hands dirty, and working in real projects is the best experience. You know, not sort of you can build things at home, but really get into some projects.
What's your best purchase under $100?
I really don't buy anything that's under $100 often. It's very, very, very few. Unfortunately, I have a bit of a spending habit, and nothing's under $100. But a Raspberry Pi, I guess, would be one of my under 100. They're pretty awesome.
Cool. Who do you recommend as a guest for this podcast in future?
Yeah, I thought about this. There's a couple of people, but in all honesty, I heard. Have you ever interviewed yourself, Mark, on the show? I'm very keen to hear about the history. I haven't really been up with your history about, but how did you get involved with the CRM user group and all that sort of stuff? So I think that would be quite an interesting episode for you if you interviewed yourself.
I think I'll have to get someone else to do that interview. Dan, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Before you go, if people want to follow you or connect with you online, what's the channels you're on?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter as MiaXRM, and that's MIIA for everyone not knowing how to spell that. MIIA XRM. LinkedIn, I'm just on Dan Hesketh, so just look me up. And the link, probably LinkedIn group, the AppSource Alliance that we mentioned earlier, look in the show notes. And my website is mia.com.au if you want to check out our stuff, our apps and things.
You've been listening to the Dynamics 365 show. Please consider subscribing to the feed on any great podcast player. Your host was Business Solution MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as NZ365 Guy. For show notes or to discuss anything covered on the show, please go to nz365guy.com/24. Talk soon.